The rain fell on me as if the entire sky wanted to swallow me whole. I stood there, on the porch of the house I helped build, knocking on the door whose color I myself had chosen, a sky blue that my son adored as a child. My fingers were numb with cold, the water streamed down my white hair and soaked the dress I had spent the whole morning choosing for my grandson's birthday. Through the living room window I could see everyone inside, the lights on, the cake on the table, the colorful balloons, the laughter I couldn't hear because of the deafening noise of the storm. And there she was, my daughter-in-law Fernanda, sitting on the sofa, with her cell phone in her hand, her eyes fixed on the screen, as if I didn't exist, as if I were just another shadow in the darkness outside. I knocked on the door again, once, twice, 3 times. My knuckles were red from knocking so much. I saw when she raised her eyes, looked directly at me through the glass, and then turned her attention back to the phone. It wasn't a look of surprise. It wasn't a look of someone who had forgotten. It was a calculated, cold, almost satisfied look, and at that moment, as the icy water ran down my back, and I felt my knees weaken, I understood that this wasn't forgetfulness, it was a message. A declaration of silent war that she had been waging against me for years, and that now, finally, she had the courage to show openly. I was 68 years old, I had raised a son alone, I had worked my whole life, I had given everything I had and everything I didn't have, and there I was, outside my own family, treated like an unwanted stranger. My tears mingled with the rain, and I wondered for the first time in many years if everything I had sacrificed had been worth it. But let me go back to the beginning, because you need to understand how I got to that moment. My name is Donna Carmen, and I was born in a small town in the interior of Minas Gerais, in a dirt floor house where we shared a single egg between 4 siblings for breakfast. My father worked in the fields, and my mother washed clothes for others. I learned early on that life gave nothing for free, that every achievement came with sweat and tears. I married Joaquim at 19, a good hard-working man who promised me the moon and the stars. For a few years we were happy. He got a job in a factory in São Paulo, and we moved to the big capital, full of dreams and fear. When Marcos was born, my son, my only son, I swore to myself that he would have everything I didn't have, that he would study, that he would have a profession, that he would never go hungry or cold. But life, as always, had other plans. Joaquim died in a work accident when Marcos was only 6 years old, a collapse on the construction site. They called me in the middle of the afternoon, and I still remember the ground disappearing from under my feet, the scream that came from my throat and seemed to have no end. Suddenly, I was alone in the world, with a child to raise, with no family nearby, no money saved, nothing but my 2 hands and my determination not to let my son suffer. I started working as a cleaner in 3 different houses. I woke up at 4 in the morning and only returned at 10 at night. My knees bled from scrubbing floors so much, my hands cracked in the winter, but every penny went to Marcos's school, to his books, to his clothes. I wore the same 3 pieces of clothing for years, but my son always had a new uniform. I ate the leftovers from the employer's lunch, but Marcos's plate was always full. I'm not telling this to victimize myself. I'm telling it because it's the truth. Because every sacrifice I made was a conscious choice, a proof of love that I stamped daily on my own flesh. And Marcos grew up. He grew up handsome, intelligent, dedicated. He passed the entrance exam for engineering at a public university, the first person in our family to set foot in college. I cried so much on the day of the approval that I thought I would dehydrate. He was my pride, my reason for living, the proof that all that suffering had been worth it. It was in college that he met Fernanda. She was his classmate, the daughter of wealthy people, raised in a large apartment in a noble neighborhood. The first time he introduced her to me, I felt a chill down my spine that I couldn't explain. She looked at our simple little apartment with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, greeted me with a limp, clammy handshake, and spent the whole dinner talking about the trips her family took to Europe. I tried to like her. I swear I tried. After all, she made my son happy, and that was all that mattered. When they got married, I gave them all my savings as a gift, the money I had saved for years for an emergency. With that money they made a down payment on their apartment. Fernanda never thanked me, not once. She simply accepted it, as if it were my obligation, as if I owed it to her for some reason I was unaware of. The years went by, and I gradually noticed the change in my son. He who used to call me every day, started calling once a week, then once a month. The visits became rare, always with ready-made excuses. Fernanda is tired, we have an engagement, next time, Mom. And when they finally visited me, or when I went to their house, Fernanda made a point of belittling me in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Comments about my clothes, "Do you still wear that, Donna Carmen?" About my food, "This recipe is very traditional, isn't it?" About the way I speak, "They speak like that in the countryside, right?" She never shouted, never was openly rude. Everything came wrapped in fake smiles and sweet tones of voice, which made it impossible for me to complain without seeming like the dramatic and meddling mother-in-law. And my son, blinded by love or simply a coward, I still can't tell, never noticed, or pretended not to notice. When Pedrinho, my grandson, was born, I thought things would change. That baby was my renewal, my fresh start, the continuation of the love I had dedicated my whole life to. I offered to help, to care for, to be present. Fernanda accepted my help, but only at times that were convenient for her. When she wanted to go out with her friends, I was called urgently to stay with the baby. When she needed someone to stay up all night because Pedrinho had colic, I was there. But in the beautiful moments, in the family photos, in the Sunday outings, I was systematically excluded. "Oh, it's just that we wanted a moment just for us," she would say, with that smile that I had learned to hate. I swallowed it. I swallowed everything. Because what could I do? Arguing with her meant losing access to my son and my grandson, and I couldn't bear that. So I kept quiet, smiled, thanked for the crumbs of attention, and cried alone in my empty apartment, asking myself where I had gone wrong, what I had done to deserve that treatment. Pedrinho's 5th birthday was scheduled for a Saturday in November. Fernanda had organized a big party at their house, a house that, it's worth remembering, only existed because of the money I had given. She invited all her friends, her family, Marcos's work colleagues, and she invited me too, almost as an addendum, a detail she couldn't completely ignore. "The party starts at 3, she had told me on the phone, with that voice of someone who is doing a favor. I got ready with all the care in the world. I chose the navy blue dress that I had bought especially for the occasion. I put on lipstick, combed my hair, put on the earrings that Joaquim had given me on our first wedding anniversary. I bought a beautiful gift for Pedrinho, a kit of children's books that I knew he would love because that child had taken after me in his love for reading. I left home at 2 in the afternoon, even though I lived 40 minutes away, because I didn't want to be late for anything in this world. But the bus broke down in the middle of the road, and it started to rain. A heavy, sudden rain, the kind that seems like divine punishment. I got off the bus and walked the rest of the way, because I didn't have money for a taxi, and the apps were all priced up because of the rain. When I finally arrived at my son's house, it was already 4:30 in the afternoon. I was soaked from head to toe. My new dress was ruined. The gift wrapping had fallen apart, and the books were wet. But I was there. I had arrived. I rang the doorbell. No one answered. I knocked on the door. Nothing. I could hear the music inside, the voices, the laughter. I knocked harder, and that's when I saw her through the window. Fernanda, sitting on the sofa, looking directly at me, and doing absolutely nothing. I knocked on the door for 20 minutes. 20 minutes under that torrential rain, while all the party guests were having fun inside, while my grandson was blowing out the candles without me, while my daughter-in-law was looking at me through the glass with that expression of false indifference. It was my son who finally opened the door. He had gone to the bathroom, and on the way back, saw me through the hallway window. "Mom, what are you doing out there?" he shouted, his face full of astonishment. I couldn't answer. I was trembling so much from the cold that my teeth were chattering. He pulled me inside, shouted for towels, asked what had happened. And that's when Fernanda got up from the sofa, with all the calm in the world, and said, "Oh my God, Dona Carmen, were you out there? I didn't even notice. It was an oversight, I swear. With all the hustle and bustle of the party, I didn't even see you arrive. I'm so sorry." She said it with a smile so rehearsed, so perfectly calibrated, that for a second I almost believed her. Almost. But I had seen her eyes meet mine through the glass. I had seen her choose not to get up. It wasn't forgetfulness, it was deliberate cruelty. The other guests looked at me with pity. Fernanda's parents exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. My grandson came running to hug me, not understanding why Grandma was all wet and crying. "Grandma, you missed my cake," he said, with that innocence that only children have. I hugged him so tight I thought I'd never let go. Fernanda continued the rest of the party as if nothing had happened, smiling for the photos, serving the guests, being the perfect hostess, and I stood there, in a corner of the room, wrapped in a towel, feeling like I didn't belong there, that I was an intruder in my own son's life. If you're following this story and feeling in your heart the same thing I felt that day, I want to ask you something. Subscribe to the channel, because stories like this need to be told, they need to be heard, and if you've made it this far, it's because something in you also knows this pain. Stay with me. That night, after all the guests had left, I asked to speak with my son alone. Fernanda tried to interfere, but Marcos, for the first time in years, said he needed a moment with his mother. We went to the kitchen, and I told him everything. I told him about the years of subtle humiliations, about the malicious comments, about the systematic exclusions, and I told him about that night, about how I saw her look at me through the window and choose not to open the door. My son was silent for a long time. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the internal battle between love for his mother and love for his wife. "Mom," he said finally, Fernanda said it was forgetfulness. Maybe you misinterpreted it. She was very busy with the party and I didn't let him finish. Marcos, I said, with a calm that surprised me, I raised you alone. I worked my whole life for you to have everything. I never asked you for anything in return, never demanded anything. But I need you to look me in the eyes now and tell me, do you believe your mother or not? He looked away, and that look away was the most painful answer I had ever received in my life. My son, the boy for whom I had given up everything, didn't believe me. Or worse, he believed me, but he didn't have the courage to admit it. I left that night without saying goodbye to Fernanda, in the taxi back home, because this time Marcos insisted on paying. I cried all the tears I had held back for years. I cried for the husband I lost too soon. I cried for the sacrifices I made that seemed to have been in vain. I cried for the family I dreamed of and never really had. But when I got home, something inside me had changed. I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, the swollen eyes, the hair still damp, the ruined dress, and made a decision. I wasn't going to humiliate myself anymore. I wasn't going to beg for crumbs of attention anymore. I wasn't going to accept being treated as a disposable nuisance anymore. I had spent my whole life taking care of others. It was time to take care of myself. In the following weeks, I started to rebuild my life. I went back to the church I had abandoned for lack of time. I reconnected with old friends, women my age, who also had stories of pain and overcoming. I started taking painting classes at a community center in the neighborhood, something I had always wanted to do, but had never allowed myself to. And for the first time in decades, I woke up in the morning wanting to live, not just with the obligation to survive. My son called me a few times, always with that guilty voice of someone who knows they did wrong but doesn't know how to fix it. I answered, talked, but maintained an emotional distance that was new to both of us. Fernanda, on the other hand, made no contact, no apology, no attempt at explanation. Her silence confirmed everything I already knew. 2 months passed, and then something happened that changed everything. I received a call from a former employer of mine, Mrs. Helena. She was an 80-something-year-old lady, a widow, rich, who I had worked for almost 15 years before retiring. We always had a relationship of affection and respect, and she treated me more like a friend than as an employee. Carmen, she said on the phone, I need to tell you something you need to know. Mrs. Helena told me that she had met Fernanda at a charity event a few weeks earlier, and that Fernanda, unaware of the connection between us, had spent the whole night talking bad about me to a group of women. She had told them, laughing, about how she let me, outside in the rain. It was hilarious, Fernanda had said, according to Dona Helena. The old woman was out there banging on the door like a beggar. I pretended I didn't see her. Marcos is so gullible, he believed me when I said it was an oversight. Dona Helena said she was so disgusted that she left the party early, and that she decided to tell me because she thought I deserved to know the truth. I hung up the phone with trembling hands, not from sadness this time, from anger, a clean, righteous anger that burned in my chest like an ember. That woman had deliberately humiliated me and was even bragging about it to strangers, and my son, my own son, was being called gullible for believing his wife instead of the mother who had sacrificed everything for him. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake thinking about what to do. Part of me wanted to call Marcos and tell him everything, wanted to scream, wanted to demand justice, but another part, a wiser part, knew that wouldn't do any good. He'd probably doubt me again, he'd defend his wife, and I'd come off as the crazy, dramatic mother-in-law. No, I needed a different approach. I needed the truth to come out in a way that no one could deny. Christmas was coming. Fernanda, to maintain the appearance of a perfect family, invited me to Christmas Eve dinner at their house. For the first time, I accepted without hesitation. Of course I'll go, I said on the phone, with a sweetness that even surprised me. Family is everything, isn't it? On Christmas Eve, I got dressed with the same care as always, but this time, I wasn't nervous. I was prepared. I arrived promptly at 8 o'clock. The house was beautiful, decorated with lights and expensive ornaments. All the important guests were there, Fernanda's parents, her siblings, some friends of the couple, and Dona Helena was there too, whom Fernanda had invited because she was an important figure in local society, unaware of our connection. When Fernanda saw me, her smile wavered for a second. She didn't expect me to actually come, but she quickly recovered and came to greet me with that fake hug as always. Dona Carmen, how nice that you came, and you even look pretty today. The even didn't go unnoticed, but I smiled. Thank you, dear. You also look like you're trying hard. Dinner went normally for the first few hours. Plenty of food, superficial conversations, polite laughter. My grandson came to sit on my lap, and I savored every second of that precious contact. Then, when everyone was gathered in the living room for the gift exchange, Dona Helena stood up. Before we open the gifts, she said, with that natural authority of someone who is used to being in charge of environments, I would like to make a toast, a special toast to an extraordinary woman who is here today. Fernanda smiled, clearly thinking the toast was for her. I want to toast Dona Carmen, Dona Helena continued, a woman I had the privilege of knowing for over 20 years, A woman who worked her whole life to raise her son alone, who sacrificed everything without ever complaining, who has more dignity in her little finger than many people have in their whole body. Fernanda's smile began to wither. And I want to take this moment, Donna Helena continued, looking directly at my daughter-in-law, to say that I was very disappointed with certain things I heard recently. Things that were said about Donna Carmem in a mocking, humiliating tone. Things that involve rain, closed doors, and a cruelty that I didn't imagine existed in environments that are supposedly civilized. The silence that settled in the room was deafening. Fernanda turned pale. Her parents exchanged confused glances. My son looked from Donna Helena to his wife, clearly trying to understand what was happening. I don't know what you're talking about, Fernanda stammered, her voice failing. Oh, you know, Donna Helena replied, with a devastating calm. You told me yourself, at Donna Marisa's party, a few weeks ago. You even told it laughing. You said it was hilarious to leave your mother-in-law outside in the rain, that you pretended not to see her, that your husband is gullible for believing you. I saw the exact moment when Fernanda's world collapsed. The mask fell. All the guests were looking at her now, not with admiration, but with a mixture of shock and repulsion. Her mother stood up, her face red with shame. Fernanda, is this true? Fernanda started to cry. Fake tears, I knew, but tears nonetheless. I was kidding. It was a joke. You don't understand. Donna Carmem is always picking on me, always looking at me with judgment. You just what? My son interrupted. His voice was hard like I had never heard before. You told me it was an oversight. You swore you hadn't seen my mother. And now I find out that you left her in the rain on purpose, and even went around telling other people as if it were a joke. Mark, honey, you need to see things from my perspective. Wendy tried to approach him, but he moved away. See things from your perspective. My mother is almost 70 years old. She stood in the rain for 20 minutes while you watched and did nothing. And you laughed about it with strangers. I remained silent throughout the entire scene. I didn't need to say a word. The truth was doing the work for me. Wendy tried to defend herself, but every word that came out of her mouth only made the situation worse. Her parents, clearly mortified, apologized on their daughter's behalf and left early. The other guests made up excuses to leave. In less than an hour, only my son Wendy, little Timmy, who had been taken to his room by the nanny, and I remained. My son sat next to me on the sofa. He was crying. My strong boy, who I hadn't seen cry since his father's death, was crying. I'm so sorry, Mom, he said, holding my hands. I'm sorry I didn't believe you, for being a coward, for letting this happen. I stroked his face like I did when he was a child. I forgive you, son. I've always forgiven you. But you need to understand something. I won't accept being mistreated anymore. By anyone. Not even for the love of you. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I know, Mom. I know. Wendy tried to approach, her face swollen from crying. Mrs. Carter, I'm sorry. I know I messed up. I'll change. I swear. I interrupted her, raising my hand. Wendy, I said, looking her in the eye for the first time without fear. I don't need your apology. I don't need your approval. And I certainly don't need your permission to be a part of my son's and my grandson's life. What you did to me was cruel. It was petty. And it revealed the kind of person you are inside. I don't hate you. I don't have the energy for that. But I'm also not going to pretend that everything is okay. If you want to change, change. Not for me, but for yourself. Because the person you are now isn't someone you should be proud of. I stood up, grabbed my purse and went to Timmy's room to say goodbye. He was sleeping, his little face serene, oblivious to all the drama that had happened. I kissed his forehead and whispered, Grandma loves you. I'll always love you. And I'll always be here for you. I left that house with my head held high. For the first time in years, I wasn't running away. I was leaving victorious. The months that followed were transformative. My son and Wendy started couples therapy. He started visiting me alone, regularly, bringing Timmy whenever he could. Our relationship, which had become so strained, began to rebuild on more honest foundations. Wendy, to my surprise, really tried to change. I don't know if it was out of genuine remorse or fear of losing her marriage, but she started treating me with a respect that had never existed before. We weren't friends, and probably never would be, but we were able to coexist with civility. As for me, I discovered a strength I didn't know I had. I discovered that I didn't need anyone's validation to know my worth. That the sacrifices I made weren't in vain, even if they weren't always recognized. That dignity isn't lost by being mistreated. It's lost when we accept the mistreatment in silence. Today, when I look back at that rainy night when I stood outside knocking on the door of my own family, I no longer feel pain. I feel gratitude, because it was that moment of maximum humiliation that awakened me, that made me realize I deserved more, that gave me the courage to demand the respect that has always been my right. The rain that night soaked me to the bone, but it also washed something away inside me. It washed away the submission, the fear, the desperate need for approval, and in its place, a new woman was born. A woman who finally understood that loving others doesn't mean erasing yourself, that taking care of your family doesn't mean accepting being trampled on, that true strength isn't in shouting,
but in knowing the right moment to speak the truth in a low and firm voice. If you've made it this far, I want to leave you with a message. Never let anyone convince you that you don't deserve respect. No matter your age, your financial status, your place in the family, you deserve to be treated with dignity. And if someone makes you feel otherwise, remember, the door may be closed, the rain may be falling, but you always have the power to rise again and find your own shelter. I found mine, and you will find yours too.